No mines, no naval blockade, no armada stretched across the water, a few cheap drones, that's all it took. Iran didn't need a naval blockade to bring traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to a halt. It didn't use underwater mines. It didn't rely on anti-ship missiles. It used cheap drones. And all of a sudden, insurers and shipping companies decided that it was unsafe to traverse that very narrow S-curve of that waterway. That quote is from Helima Croft, global head of commodity strategy at RBC Capital Markets. And she said something else that should stop you cold. We're now facing what looks like the biggest energy crisis since the oil embargo in the 1970s. The 1970s? Gas lines around the block, rationing cards, fistfights at filling stations. That is the comparison being made right now by one of the most respected voices in global commodities. Not by a YouTuber, not by a headline writer. By the person whose job it is to tell the world, as largest banks, what oil is about to do. And what oil is about to do is something you need to understand before you pull into a gas station this week. Because the price on that sign out front, it was calculated in a world that no longer exists. The Strait of Hormuz just went dark, and everything that moves, by truck, by plane, by ship, by rail, runs on what used to flow through it. Stay with me. This one affects you directly. Let's rewind to February 28th, 2026. The United States and Israel initiated coordinated airstrikes on Iran under Operation Epic Fury, targeting military facilities, nuclear sites, and leadership, resulting in the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Iran responded with retaliatory missile and drone attacks on Israeli territory and U.S. military bases in Gulf states, while the IRGC issued warnings prohibiting vessel passage through the strait. Within hours of the strikes, the IRGC transmitted warnings via VHF radio to vessels in the strait, stating that no ships would be permitted to pass. Then came the commander's public declaration. The strait is closed. If anyone tries to pass, the heroes of the Revolutionary Guard and the regular Navy will set those ships ablaze. That was Ebrahim Jabari, a senior advisor to the IRGC's commander-in-chief. And then they proved it wasn't just talk. At least 3 tankers were struck near the strait, including one off Oman that was set ablaze. At least 5 tankers have been damaged and 2 personnel killed. The U.S.-flagged Stena Imperative was struck twice at the port of Bahrain, causing a fire. A port worker was killed and 2 others were hurt in the attack. Even the Athenova, a vessel with links to Iran itself, was struck by 2 drones after attempting to cross the strait, targeted by the IRGC for violating its own closure. That's the part that changes everything. Iran isn't just threatening ships from hostile nations. It's enforcing the closure against everyone, including its own. Now, a lot of channels are going to tell you about the missiles. They're going to show you maps and explosions and argue about whose side is winning. That's not what this video is about. This video is about your wallet. Because here's what most people don't understand. You don't have to live anywhere near the Middle East for this strait to control your life. It controls the price of your morning commute, the cost of the food on your shelf, the number on your heating bill. And right now, that strait is a ghost town. On March 1st and 2nd, no ships appeared in the strait. By March 4th, the strait remained effectively closed with only 5 vessel crossings recorded. 5? In a corridor that normally handles dozens of supertankers every single day. So let me walk you through exactly what that means, starting with the strait itself, then the oil market, then the gas station on your corner. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran and Oman. It's 33 kilometers, 21 miles, wide at its narrowest point, with the shipping lane just 3 kilometers wide in either direction. 3 kilometers. That's it. That's the width of the artery that keeps the global economy's blood pumping. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, about 20 million barrels of oil worth roughly $500 billion in annual global energy trade transited through the Strait of Hormuz each day in 2024. This waterway handles 25% of the world as maritime oil trade, 20% of liquefied natural gas shipments, and about 33% of the world's fertilizers, including sulfur and ammonia. It's also a key route for other commodities like aluminum, sugar, and fertilizer. So when people say oil choke point, they're underselling it. This is a choke point for civilization. Fuel, food, fertilizer, chemicals, all flowing through a corridor you could see across on a clear day. And it just stopped. Here's what makes this different from every war game scenario that's ever been run on the Strait of Hormuz. Every military simulation assumed Iran would need to physically blockade it. Mines across the seabed, fast attack boats in formation, anti-ship missiles locked on every vessel. Iran did none of that. It's really an insurance-driven shutdown, says Croft. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed for commercial shipping, despite technically remaining open. Insurance withdrawal is doing the work that physical blockade has not. The outcome for cargo flow is largely the same. Protection and indemnity insurance was removed for March 5th, making the economic risk too high for ship owners to use the strait. Think about that for a second. Iran didn't have to sink a fleet. It just had to hit a few tankers, drone a few more, and let the insurance math do the rest. The underwriters in London and Zurich closed the strait, not the IRGC Navy. Tankers are not moving because they are worried about their physical security, and ship owners will need to see a sustained period without attacks to venture through the strait again. Before the strikes even began, war risk ship insurance premiums for the strait had already increased from 0.125% to between 0.2% and 0.4% of ship insurance value per transit. For very large oil tankers, that's an increase of $250,000 per crossing. After the attack started, the insurance didn't get more expensive, it disappeared entirely. So what happens when the world's most important energy corridor shuts down? Ships stop. Clarkson's research, which tracks shipping data, estimates that about 3,200 ships, roughly 4% of global ship tonnage, are idle in the Gulf. Meanwhile, about 500 ships are currently waiting outside the Gulf and ports off the coast of the UAE and Oman. Major container shipping companies, including Maersk, CMA CGM, and Hapag-Lloyd, have suspended transits through the strait and related routes. And it's not just the strait. Houthi-controlled Yemen announced it would resume attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea, forcing Suez Canal traffic to reroute around Africa's Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to transit times and increasing shipping costs. So the two fastest routes connecting Asia, Europe, and the Gulf, Hormuz and Suez, are both compromised at the same time. That has never happened before. Iraq, a major oil producer, is having to shut down production at some of its largest oil fields because without being able to export through the Strait of Hormuz, it has nowhere to put that oil. Iraqi officials told Reuters that Iraq has already cut production by 1.5 million barrels per day as it runs out of storage due to the Hormuz closure. Oil is being pumped out of the ground in Iraq with literally no place to put it. That is a sentence that should not exist in a functioning global economy. And yet, here we are. Now here's a detail that tells you more than any satellite image. Reuters reported that an oil tanker called the Pola sailed through the Strait of Hormuz en route to a UAE port to load crude. The tanker switched off its AIS tracker late on Monday when it approached the strait, and the vessel reappeared on Tuesday off Abu Dhabi. It went dark. A commercial oil tanker turned off its tracking system, the maritime equivalent of putting tape over your license plate, just to make a single transit through a corridor it used to sail through routinely. That's not commerce. That's a smuggling run. Through a waterway that 2 weeks ago was the most heavily trafficked energy corridor on the planet. And it's not alone. AIS disruption across the Gulf continues, with 44 injected signal zones and 92 denial areas detected. More than 1,100 vessels experienced GPS and AIS interference during the early phase of the conflict. The entire navigational infrastructure of the Persian Gulf is degraded. Ships can't see each other, they can't confirm their own positions, they can't trust their instruments, and somewhere in those waters, Iranian speedboats are hunting anything that moves without permission. All right, here's where this stops being a war and starts being your Tuesday morning. As of March 5th, the national average for a gallon of regular gasoline jumped nearly 27 cents in just 1 week to $3.25. The national average hit $3.11 per gallon on Tuesday alone, up 11 cents overnight. That was the biggest single-day spike since March 4th, 2022, when the world was reeling from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And it's not done. Oil analyst Tom Kloza expects the national average to reach 3.25 to 3.150 in the coming weeks. Prices will jump even higher in the western U.S. JP Morgan's head of global commodities research warned that if Gulf countries exhaust their storage capacity, Brent could spike to $120 per barrel. Some estimates warn of prices as high as $130 per barrel, matching the all-time high seen during the 2007-2008 oil shock, with extreme scenario projections as high as $300 per barrel. Now let me translate those barrel prices into pump prices. As a general rule of thumb, every $1 increase in a barrel of oil translates into a 2.5 cent increase in gas prices. Oil was around $67 a barrel in January. U.S. oil prices have surged 28% to above $86 a barrel this week. That's a $19 jump. Multiply that by 2.5 cents. That's roughly 47 cents a gallon baked into the pipeline right now, and not all of it has reached the pump yet. If Brent hits $120, you're looking at north of $4.50 a gallon. If the extreme scenarios play out, we're in $5 plus territory. Again, but here's what most people miss. It's not just gas. The oil price spike will also lead to increases in diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, and natural gas prices, increasing the cost of shipping, airline tickets, and home heat. Because oil prices underpin everything from transportation to manufacturing costs, surging crude prices could reach well beyond the gas pump. Even if core inflation measures exclude food and fuel, sustained oil increases tend to bleed into transportation, logistics, manufacturing input costs, and ultimately, consumer prices. That gallon of milk, delivered by a truck that runs on diesel, those Amazon packages, shipped by carriers burning jet fuel, your electric bill, in many states still tied to natural gas. All of it connects back to a 21-mile-wide corridor between Iran and Oman that is now functionally shut. Tensions are once again flaring up in one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway, connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, is more than just a line on a map. It's the artery through which nearly a fifth of the world's daily oil consumption flows. Any disruption here sends shockwaves through the global economy, and right now, the waters are getting choppy. So, what's happening? Recent incidents, including the seizure of commercial tankers and heightened military posturing, have put international powers on high alert. The key players involved are Iran and a coalition of Western nations, led by the United States. Iran, citing national security concerns and responding to international sanctions, has demonstrated its ability to control access to the strait. In response, the U.S. and its allies have increased their naval presence in the region, aiming to ensure freedom of navigation and protect global energy supplies. This isn't just a regional dispute. It has massive global implications. Think about it. A significant portion of the oil that powers our cars, heats our homes, and runs our industries passes through this very strait every single day. Countries like China, Japan, India, and South Korea are heavily dependent on these shipments. When the flow is threatened, oil prices can skyrocket almost overnight. We've seen it happen before. Even the threat of a closure can cause jitters in the market, leading to higher prices at the pump for all of us. This is the direct link between distant geopolitical events and your wallet. The current situation is a delicate balancing act. On one side, you have Iran's strategic interests and its leverage over a vital global resource. On the other, you have the international community's demand for stable and secure energy markets. The diplomatic dance is incredibly complex. Negotiations are happening behind the scenes, with various countries trying to de-escalate the situation and find a peaceful resolution. But the military presence from both sides creates a powder keg environment where a single miscalculation could lead to a much larger conflict. Historically, the Strait of Hormuz has been a flashpoint for decades. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the so-called Tanker War saw both sides attacking oil tankers, which prompted international naval intervention. We're seeing echoes of that history today, but the stakes are arguably higher. The global economy is more interconnected than ever, and the energy market is incredibly sensitive to supply disruptions. A prolonged crisis could not only trigger a global recession, but also realign international alliances. Nations might be forced to choose sides, further complicating an already tense diplomatic landscape. So what happens next? There are a few potential scenarios. The best case outcome is successful diplomacy. International mediators could broker a deal that addresses Iran's concerns while guaranteeing safe passage for all vessels. This would calm the markets and pull the region back from the brink. The worst case scenario is a military confrontation. This could involve naval clashes, mine laying, or a full-scale blockade of the strait. The economic fallout from this would be catastrophic, far exceeding the impact of previous disruptions. A more likely scenario is a continuation of the current gray zone conflict, a tense standoff with periodic, low-level incidents that keep the world on edge without escalating into all-out war. This is a story that affects everyone, whether you're a policymaker in Washington, a trader in London, or just a regular person filling up your car. The stability of the Strait of Hormuz is directly tied to global economic health and security. As this situation develops, we'll be keeping a close eye on the diplomatic channels, the military movements, and of course, the price of oil. It's a powerful reminder of how interconnected our world truly is. So let me bring this back to where it started. Your gas station, your driveway, your budget. Americans use about 370 million gallons of gas per day. Every cent of increase costs this country $3.7 million per day. A 50-cent spike? That's $185 million a day pulled out of American wallets and fed into the price of a war most people couldn't find on a map 2 weeks ago. Well, the scale of what is at stake cannot be overstated, says Hakan Kaya, senior portfolio manager at Neuberger Berman. Oil companies can likely absorb a 1 to 2 week slowdown, but a full or near full closure lasting a month or more would require demand destruction at levels that could push crude well into triple digits, and European natural gas prices toward crisis levels. We're on day 7. The Strait of Hormuz remained effectively closed as of March 4th, with only 5 vessel crossings recorded. The IRGC stated it was impossible for any ships to pass through. 3,200 ships sitting idle, 500 more waiting outside. Insurance markets collapsed, GPS jammed across the Gulf. Tankers going dark just to make a single run. Iraq shutting down its oil fields, Japan requesting emergency reserves, Pakistan begging Saudi Arabia for alternate routes, and gas prices climbing every single morning when you check. This is not a war happening somewhere else. This is a war happening in your fuel tank, your grocery bill, your heating system, and your retirement account, right now. When analysts have looked at the things that could go wrong in global oil markets, this is about as wrong as things could go at any single point of failure. The worst case scenario they always warned about, you're living in it. The Strait of Hormuz just went dark, and the price of everything just changed. This is OG Silver. I'll see you in the next one.